All right, Karina baby. So our next story for the 28th is Roger the Robot. There he is, his little box, square face, and he's laying nuts and bolts. Look at that. Did you see that? Ooh, nuts and bolts. Roger is a robot with metallic hands and feet. A super brain and saucer ears make Roger quite complete. Though he though he's supersonic clever and can speak with metal lips, all he eats for breakfast is a bowl of microchips. Oh, he's eating microchips, not nuts and bolts. Microchips. All right, so we are going to do the third voyage. Now, what did we learn? We learned that Sinbad thought that Sinbad had this magnificent life. Just, God, why did you give him such a good plot in life and not me? And stomping his foot on the ground and acting out, being jealous and deceitful or vengeful towards like his plot in life. When he had his own lot in life, he had something heavy that he's supposed to carry somewhere, right? He was supposed to go through that. And instead, Sinbad heard this ruckus outside of his house and called for him and brought him in and fed him and gave him 100 gold coins. Not once now, but twice. He's had dinner with him twice. And so he's here for the third voyage. Let's see what happened. Here's the third voyage. After a very short time, the pleasant easy life I led made me quite forget the perils of my two voyages. So once more, proving myself with the rarest of circumstances and merchandise of Baghdad, I set sail with the merchants of my acquaintances for distant lands. We had touched at many ports and had much profit, when one day upon the open sea we were caught by a terrible wind which blew us completely out of our reckoning, and at least for several days. Oh, Karina baby. So that was a service provider that I don't have. I don't even know why I answered it. That should be on silent actually while I'm doing this with you. So after a very short time, the pleasant ease of my life. Okay, so we had touched on many ports and made much profit, when one day upon the open sea was caught by a terrible wind which blew us completely out of a reckoning and lasted for several days, finally driving us into a harbor on a strange island. I would rather have come to anchor anywhere than here, cried the captain. This island and those adjoining it are inhabited by hairy savages who are certain to attack us. Whatever these dwarfs may do, we dare not resist, since they swarm like locusts, and if one of them is killed, the rest will fall upon us and speedily make an end to us. These words caused great contention among all the ship's company, and only too soon we were to find out that the captain spoke truly. They appeared as vast multitudes of hideous savages, no more than 2 feet high and covered with reddish fur. Throwing themselves into the waves, they surrounded our vessel, chattering meanwhile in a language which we could not understand, and clinging at the ropes and gangways, they swarmed us, the ship's side, with such speed and agility that they almost seemed to fly. You may imagine the terror that seized us as we watched them, nearer drowning the hinder than nor to speak a word to thwart them from their purpose, whatever it may be. Of this we were not left long in doubt. Hoisting the sails and cutting the anchor cable, they sailed our vessel to an island which lay a little farther off, where they drove us ashore. Then, taking possession of the ship, they made off to a place from which they had come, leaving us standing upon a shore, avoiding with terror by mandrakes for a reason you'll learn before long. Turning away from the sea, we wandered miserably. Inland. Finding as we went various herbs and fruit which we ate, feeling that we might as well live as long as possible, though we had no hope of escape. Presently we saw in the distance they had no hope of escape, but what did they do? They ate. They ate as much as they possibly could, because you have to keep going. I don't care what the circus, this man's like, we're gonna die. There's these 2-inch people all around us. They're swarming us. We don't know why. And they think that they're gonna die, but still, they ate. They ate good food. Fruits and vegetables, right? Feeling that we might as well live as long as possible. Listen to those words. That we might as well live as long as possible, though we had no hope of escape. Presently we saw in the distance what seemed to be a splendid place, toward which we turned our weary steps. When we reached it, we saw that it was a castle, lofty and strongly built. Pushing back the heavy ebony doors, so the heavy black doors, we entered the courtyard, but upon the threshold of the great hall beyond it we paused, frozen with fear at the sight which greeted us. On one side lay a huge pile of bones, human bones, and on the other numberless spears for roasting. Overcome with despair, we sank trembling to the ground and lay there without speech or motion. The sun was setting when a loud noise around us. The door of the hall was violently burst open, and a hideous giant entered. He was as tall as a palm tree, and he had but one eye, which flamed like a burning coal in the middle of his forehead. His teeth were long and sharp, and he grinned horribly, while his lower lip hung down upon his chest. And he had ears like elephant ears, which covered his shoulders, and his nails were like the claws of some fierce bird. At this terrible sight, our senses left us, and we lay like dead men. When at last we came to ourselves, the giant sat examining us attentively with his fearful eye. Before long, having looked at us enough, he came toward us and stretched out his hand, took me by the back of my neck, showing me this way and that, but feeling I was more skin and bones, he set me down again and went on to the next, whom he treated in the same fashion. At last he came to the captain, and finding him the fattest of all of us, he took him up in one hand and stuck him upon a spit, and proceeded to kindle a huge fire, at which he presently roasted him. After the giant had supped, he went to sleep, snoring like the loudest thunder, while the rest of us lay shivering with horror the whole night through. When day finally broke, the giant awoke and went out, leaving us alone in the castle. When we believed him to be really gone, we started up, bemoaning our horrible fate, until the hall echoed with our despairing cries. Though we were many and our enemy was alone, it does not occur to us to kill him. Indeed, we should have found that a hard task, even if we had thought of it. But no plan could we devise to deliver ourselves. So at last, submitting to our sad fate, we spent the day in wandering up and down the island, eating such fruits as we could find. And when night came, we returned to the castle, having sought in vain for any other place of shelter. At sunset, the giant returned, supped upon one of our unhappy comrades, slept and snored till dawn, and then left as before. Our condition seemed to us so frightful and Several of my companions thought it would be better to leap from the cliffs and perish in the waves at once rather than await so miserable an end. But I had a plan of escape which I now unfolded to them, and which they immediately agreed to attempt with me. Listen, my brothers, I said, you know that plenty of driftwood lies around the shore. Let us make several rafts and carry them to a suitable place. If our plot succeeds, we can wait patiently for the chance of some passing ship which would rescue us. If it fails, we must quickly take our rafts. Frail as they are, we have more chance of saving our lives with them than we have if we remain here. All agreed with me, and we spent the day in building rafts, each capable of carrying 3 persons. At nightfall we returned to the castle, and very soon came the giant, and one more of our number was sacrificed. As soon as he had finished his horrible repast, he lay down and slept as before, and when we heard him begin to snore, I and 9 of the boldest of my comrades rode softly. Each of us took a spit, which we made red hot in the fire, and then, at a given signal, we plunged it with one cord into the giant's eyes, completely blinding him. Uttering a terrible cry, the giant sprang to his feet, reaching about in every direction to try to seize one of us. But we all fled different ways, and as soon as the deed was done, we threw ourselves flat upon the ground in corners where he was not likely to touch us. With his feet, after a vain search, he fumbled about till he found the door leading from the castle and fled out of it, howling frightfully. As for us, my companions and I immediately made haste to leave the fatal place. See, they didn't have to do that to him. They didn't have to plunge out his eye. He was going to go to sleep and leave for the day. Like, why didn't they just leave? Why didn't they just leave? Like, I don't understand. Alright. And sustaining ourselves back beside our rafts, we waited to see what would happen. Our idea was that when the sun rose, we saw nothing of the giant and no longer heard his howls, which seemed to come faintly through the darkness, growing more and more distant. We should conclude that he was dead, and that we might safely stay on the island, and need not risk our lives upon the frail rafts. But alas, morning light showed us our enemy approaching, supported on either hand by 2 giants near as large and fearful as himself, while a crowd of others followed close upon their heels. Hesitating no longer, we clambered into our rafts and rowed out to sea as fast as we could. The giants, seeing their prey escape them, seized huge pieces of rocks and wading into the water, hurled them at us. So good was their aim that all rafts except the one I was on was swamped, and their likeness and crew drowned, without our being able to do anything to help them. Indeed, I and my 2 companions had all... Okay, so they thought there was only one Cyclops on the island, one one-eyed giant. They were so wrong. They had more places to go. They still would have been eaten. There's way more Cyclopses on the island. And they thought that if they hurt them, they could get away safely. Or else have them die and stay on the island. But why would they want to stay on the island, though? So now they're going out to sea, right? Except the one I was on, which was swarmed, and their luckless crew drowned, without our being able to do anything to help them. Indeed, I and my 2 companions had all we could do to keep our raft beyond the reach of the giants, but the dint of hard rowing, we at last gained the open sea. Here we were at the mercy of the winds and waves, which tossed us to and fro that entire day and night. But the next day we found ourselves near an island upon which we gladly landed. There we picked delicious fruits, and having sustained our hunger, we presently lay down to rest upon the shore. Suddenly we were aroused by a loud rustling noise, and started up, saw it was caused by an enormous snake which was rapidly gliding towards us over the sand. So swiftly it came that it had seized one of my comrades before he had time to fly, and in spite of his struggles and cries, speedily crushed him in its mighty coils, and proceeded to swallow him. By this time, my other companion and I were running for our lives to some place where we might hope to be safe from the new horror. Seeing a tall tree, we climbed up into it, having first proved ourselves with the shore of the fruit. Having first provided ourselves with a store of fruit from the surrounding bushes. When night fell, I fell asleep, only to be awakened one more time by the terrible snake, which coiled itself around the tree, and finding my comrade, who was perched just below me, swallowed him and crawled away, leaving me half dead with terror. When the sun rose, I crept down from the tree with hardly a hope of escaping, and a dreadful fate which had overtaken my comrades. But life is sweet, and I determined to do everything I could to save myself. What a good story so far. He's determined to live. He's like, I need to live. He's like, look at my circumstances. This will change. I need to live. And so he lives. All day long, I toiled with frantic haste and collected quantities of dry brushwood, which I bound with reeds, and making a circle of them under my tree, I piled them firmly one upon another until I had a kind of tent in which I croaked like a mouse in a hole when she sees the cat coming. In which I crouched like a mouse in a hole when she sees the cat coming. You may imagine what a frightful night I passed, for the snake returned eager to devour me, and glided around me, my frail shelter, seeking an entrance. Every moment I feared that it would succeed in pushing aside some of the brushwood, but happily for me, it held together. And when it grew light, my enemy returned, baffled and hungry, to his den. As for me, I was more dead than alive, shaking with fright, and half suffocated by the poisonous breath of the monster. I came out of my tent and crawled down to the sea. I felt that it would be better to plunge from the cliffs and end my life at once than pass another night in such horror. But to my joy and relief, I saw a ship in the distance and shouted wildly and waving my turban. I managed to attract the attention of the crew. A boat was sent to rescue me, and very soon I found myself on board, surrounded by a wandering crew of sailors and merchants, eager to know by what chance I found myself on the destitute island. After I had told my story, they regaled me with the choicest food the ship afforded, and the captain, seeing that I was dressed in rags, generously bestowed upon me one of his own coats. After sailing about for some time and touching at many ports, the ship came at last to the island of Salahat, where sandalwood grows in great abundance. Here we anchored, and as I stood watching the merchants preparing to sell or exchange their goods, the captain came up to me and said, I have here some merchandise belonging to a passenger of mine who has died. Will you do me the favor to trade with it? And when I meet with his heirs, I shall be able to give them the money, though it will be only just that you shall have a portion for your trouble. It will be just that you have a portion for your trouble. I consented gladly, for I did not like standing by idle. Whereupon he pointed the bales out to me and sent for the person whose duty it was to keep a list of the goods that were upon the ship. When the man came, he asked in which name the merchandise was to be registered. In the name of Sinbad, the sailor, replied the captain. At this I was greatly surprised, but looking carefully at him, I recognized him to be the captain of the ship upon which I had made my second voyage. Though he had altered much since that time, as for him, believing me to be dead, I was no wonder that he it was no wonder that he did not recognize me. So, captain, said I, the merchandise who owned the bales was called Sinbad. Yes, he replied, he was so named. He was from Baghdad and joined my ship in Belshora. But by mischance he was left behind upon a desert island, where he had landed to fill up our water casks, and it was not until 4 hours later that he was missing. By that time the wind had freshened, and it was impossible to put back for him. You surprise me. You suppose me to have been perished then? Said I. Alas, yes, he answered. Why, captain, I cried, look well at me. I am that Sinbad, who fell asleep upon the island and awoke to find himself abandoned. The captain stared at me in amazement, but was presently convinced that I was indeed speaking the truth, and rejoiced greatly at my escape. I am glad to have that piece of carelessness off my conscience, at any rate, said he. Now take your goods and the profits I have made for you upon them, and you may prosper in the future. I took them gratefully, and as we went from one island to another, I laid in stores of cloves, cinnamon, and other spices. In one place I saw a tortoise which was 20 cubits long and as many broad, also a fish that was like a cow and had skin as thick as it used to make shields. Another fish I saw was like a camel in shape and color. By degrees we came back to Belshora, and I returned to Baghdad with as much money that I could not myself count it. Besides treasures without end, I gave largely to the poor and bought much land to add to what I already possessed, and thus ended my third voyage. When Sinbad had finished his story, he gave another 100 pieces of gold to Hindbad, who then departed with the other guests. The next day, when they all reassembled and the banquet was ended, the host continued his adventure. All right, baby, tomorrow we will do the fourth voyage. I love this story. This is the last story in this book, and this is the best story. Isn't that funny how that happens sometimes? All right, so I need to put this movie together with the other movie, because I don't know why I answered the phone. It was some bill collector person saying that I overpaid for some bill, but I didn't, because I don't have that. But that's okay. I hope that you're having a wonderful day today, Karina. I really do. I hope that you're doing just amazingly well, because I miss you so much. I pray for you all the time. Mama misses you and loves you, baby. Let's do oh say oh playmate, come out and play with me, and bring your dollies three, climb up my apple tree, shout down my rain barrel, slide down my cellar door, and we'll be jolly friends forevermore, more, more. It was a sunny day, she could not go out to play. She said with tearful eyes, my dolly's got the flu. Boo hoo 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 hoo. I ain't got no rain barrel, I ain't got no cellar door, but we'll be jolly friends forevermore, more, more. Green baby, I love you so much. Let's do Lila Tove, honey. Lila Tove, and good night to you. Lila Tove, may your dreams come true. We sing Lila Tove, may Israel protect you throughout the night until we reach the morning light. I love you, I miss you, and I can't wait to see you. I love you, baby.